Okay, so I made a copy of the 2D arrays one and called it bubbles array of objects, and we'll convert this to the data structure here. So very similar to a two-dimensional array, but instead of arrays inside of the array, we're going to have objects or associative arrays, right? Where there's a key value pairs, the named index, inside of the array. It shouldn't take too much work. All we need to do is, let's even just do it like this. Let's change this to an object where it's x colon is going to be this, comma y colon will be this random value, comma r colon will be that, and col for color colon will be that, and end the bracket. And if I hit Shift Alt F to format it, it usually turns these objects into one property or one key, property per line, x, y, r, color. All right, so now I've got this empty array and I loop 50 times and I push these objects into the array, right? So it's an array full of these objects. And now when I go into here, I can still loop through bubbles.length because it's just a regular array with multiple objects in it. But instead of going position 0, I can go .x. Right? When I go bubbles I, that'll get me one of these objects, the first one or the second one or the third object, and then I can then look inside of it and go .x or .y. And then the same thing here. Instead of 3, what did that mean again? Oh, I can go .color. And then here as well, we go .r for the radius, .y, and .x. So for me, I think this option makes the most sense. I want to have an array full of these bubbles. The data for a bubble doesn't have to be ordered, right? That's usually what an array is good for. It's for an ordered set of data. But in this case, I'd rather have them named because it makes it easier to reference. All right, let's save that and go live. And ta-da! We'll shut this one down. And there we go. And of course, we can change this to 500 if we wanted to. And we've got 500 objects. If I look up bubbles right now, right, see it's got 500 objects inside of it. And each of these objects, right, position 0 has an X, Y, R in color. And remember, objects aren't necessarily in the order we created them in. I think it does the properties alphabetically. All right. Okay. In this video, I also wanted to add, just to remind ourselves how to do this, let's actually start with an empty array. And this bubbles.push command is what was used to create, create an object and add it into the array. What I'd like to do is let's do that on an event. So let's do key events. And we'll just go document.add, add event listener key down, and I'll just have a little key down handler. And let's define that function, key down handler, an event, like that. And we can go if event.code is equal to arrow right. Maybe I want to do this. Copy and paste. I'm going to add a new random bubble, right? So it'll push to the array that value. Let's save that and see what happens. So nothing's here, right? If I look up bubbles, it's an empty array. So it is trying to loop to move the bubbles and draw them, but because bubbles.length is 0, this loop never runs. All right. But as soon as I hit the right arrow key, there's a bubble, there's a bubble, there's a bubble, there's a bubble, there's a bubble. And we hit the right arrow key and away we go. Okay, cool. So dynamically adding things to my array using that push that we learned about. Okay, actually maybe what I could do here is document.add event listener click. I will call a mouse down handler. Function mouse down handler, like so, with an event. I don't know if I need it, but it's there. Add some comments here, mouse events. And in here, why don't I, whenever I click, I'm going to add a new random bubble, cut, and paste. But this time, instead of at a random location, mouse X oops, I want to select all of that, mouse X and mouse Y. And remember, in our graphics library, mouse X and mouse Y are global variables that I have a mouse move handler and a mouse down, mouse up handler that take care of the mouse X, mouse Y. Okay. So when I save this now, whenever I click, it should create a new bubble at the mouse location. Awesome. Okay. Again, maybe I want to do arrow down, and that would go bubbles.pop. Right? Remember, pop was to remove things. So I can add, but when I hit the down arrow key, it pops the last one. So the last one was right there, it's gone. Gone. Okay. We could even get fancy, and our graphics library has a wonderful mouse in circle. Ooh. So maybe I could do something like in here, add a bubble if click on open space, remove a bubble if the bubble is clicked. Right, so I could do if context.mouse in, oh no, this is going to get complicated. I have to loop through all of my bubbles. Right, loop through all of my bubbles. So I'm going to traverse the array of bubbles and say, hey, first bubble, did I click you? Hey, second bubble, did I click you? Hey, third bubble, did I click you? So we're going to try this. We're going to say if context.mouse in circle. Was that the name of the function? Mouse in circle, yeah. And the mouse in circle function takes in a circle object that has an X, Y, and an R. Well, guess what? These bubbles are circle objects that have an X, Y, and an R. So I'm going to pass in bubbles at position I. Right? Bubbles at position I will be the current circle object that I'm looping through. And if that is true, if I've clicked that bubble, I want to go bubbles.splice. Oh dear, we might have to go back to our notes, hey? Remember adding, where was it? Modifying arrays, right? Push and pop, unshift and shift, and splice. Remember, splice tells us where we want to add or remove something. So the location, how many to remove, and I can also add things. So if I want to just remove something, I give it the index and then 1 to remove one thing. So the index will be I, because I is the circle that was clicked, right? Bubbles I is the circle that was, or the bubble that was clicked, and I want to remove one thing. Whoa. Okay, so that should remove it. And then I want to add a new random bubble, but only if this wasn't true. Oh, we got to use some logic here. Let's create a variable called let remove be false. And then if I do this, if I splice, I'll set remove to be true. Okay. Why do I do that? Because I want to know after this loop is done, right? I could have gone through this entire, all the bubbles, and I didn't click any of them. So I want to know that I didn't click anything. So if I didn't click anything, I wouldn't have made remove true, so remove would be false. And I only want to add a new random bubble if not remove, right? So if this is false, if not false, right? So if it's true, if I haven't removed anything, then I want to add a new random bubble. Woo! All right. Let's actually take this comment here, put it here, and we'll say add a new random bubble if no bubbles were removed. All right. See if my logic makes sense here. I add a bubble, I add a bubble, I add a bubble, I add a bubble. Let's try to click this one. Oh dear. Okay, it removed it and didn't add anything. Oh, I added one. Okay, removed it. I can't get the little ones. I got that one. Anyway, so it looks like it's working. If I click on an open space, it'll add it. But if I click inside of a bubble, that mouse in circle returns true. and it removes it instead of adding a new one. Okay, cool. All right, and of course we could add more properties here, right? Right now I'm just storing X, Y, R in color. Speed is another thing we could do, right? Because they're moving. Where do I move them? In here, I move them with -5 to 5. We could have variables for that. Whatever you wanted. Okay, that is that. So storing data options, right? We can store things as parallel arrays, as two-dimensional arrays, and as arrays of objects. For things like the bubbles, the array of objects is probably my favorite. I don't mind parallel arrays either. Those aren't too bad. 2D arrays, we'll talk about later in the project. I find 2D arrays work the best if you have like a grid with rows and columns, and then 2D arrays are really useful. Okay, so those are some of your options. And of course, we can add and remove things like we learned about in modifying arrays. All right, so when you're making your programs, consider which type of data storage works the best for you. But these are some useful options that can help you. All right, hope that made sense. Take care, and we'll see you in the next video.